the way that Chabad has always kept, at least from my perspective, that question so central. What are we alive for? What is existence for? Why does it feel so uncomfortable and comfortable at the same time? Homesick. We're in the right place, but we don't have the right feeling. And why do we feel this way? And like that, the cosmicness of Judaism is something that I have seen flourish actually since the death of the Rebbe. The fact that Judaism might actually be real. And I think that's the question that's been lost by the non-Chabad Orthodox community more than anything.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2024. My name is Bosi Lgani, and I will be your host. Let's begin. Alrighty. Chaim. I'm here with Rabbi Dovid Bashevkin.
You can call me Dovid.
Dovid Bashevkin. And I didn't even ask you how to introduce you. What are your credentials, sir?
What are my credentials?
Yes.
The main credentials is I'm married to my wife Tova, and I have 3 children, Zevi, Kira, and Gavi. That's the main thing. And my professional credentials is that I am... I learned in Yeshiva Ner Yisrael. I have smicha from Yeshiva universities. I did a master's thesis comparing Rebbe Tzadok and Rev Nachman. I wrote a book on sin and failure in Jewish thought, which is also a sefer called Barogas Rachim Tizkar. Been a columnist for Mishpacha, for Tablet. And I did a PhD. Can I mention that?
Sure.
Did a PhD in public policy, and I teach public policy at Yeshiva University now. And finally, I'm the host of a podcast called 1840.
Wonderful. Certainly more credentials than I have, which is, I guess, why I'm interviewing you, not the reverse. But I think I'm going to start with the elephant in the room, if that's okay with you. People listening to this podcast will probably wonder why I asked you to come on, and I want to make clear that I asked you to come on. And,
that's very kind.
You didn't ask me to come on. I want to make that clear.
It's very kind of you. They're not going to believe you, but it's still very kind of you.
Okay. It is a cynical bunch, but they're not going to believe that you didn't ask to come on.
Yeah.
They're cynical in the other way, I think. But I asked you to come on, so I think people are going to ask why.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's Homesick for Lubavitch, and most of the people, if not, there was one person who was on it that wasn't a card-carrying Lubavitcher, and that was just because he was a photographer that took an important photo of the Rebbe back in the day.
Yeah.
So, people will ask why I asked you to come on. The basic technical reason is that at the end of the year, Spotify releases these wrapped icons, and a bunch of people sent to me these images where they're top 5 podcasts, and then
we were always next to each other.
A whole bunch of them that were sent to me, where it's like, 1840 was one of them, and I was one of them. HFL was one of them. And, so I thought, okay, there's obviously some people, and they weren't all Lubavitchers, by the way.
Yeah.
Some people that sent to me were Lubavitchers, and some of them were not.
Yeah.
And I found that quite interesting. So I figured, for those people, it'd be interesting to have like a crossover episode. But I think the deeper reason, I don't even think I mentioned this to you, it happened so quickly, is that, at least as far as I'm interested, or my curiosity, this podcast is all about this state of homesickness, which is hard to define specifically, but part of the exploration is what precisely does that mean? This feeling of not being at home, right? Even if you don't really have a specific home that you wish to be in. Lubavitch in America, I actually discussed this on one of the recent episodes with my father. It's very interesting how he discussed his childhood, where his parents were refugees from the Soviet Union, and how his father did not feel at all at home in the United States, but then where was home? Because the Soviet Union was a place that he was desperate to get away from. He didn't miss it for a day. and so there was a homesickness then too, and there's a homesickness now as well. Of where exactly are we from? Where exactly, what exact, in Lubavitch, a lot of it has to do with time and wishing that we were back in a certain time before the Rebbe's passing, or a simpler time, like people like
Mm-hmm.
to say, the gute Zeiten. So anyway, there's this condition of homesickness that I'm very interested in. And for the most part, at least on this podcast, it's been discussed in a Lubavitch context. But I think it's important, even for the Lubavitch exploration, to see if that condition is not just a Lubavitch condition, but also something that other Jews in America or Jews in general experience, and to explore it from that vantage point. At least that's what I'm curious about. I'm not sure that that's where the conversation is going to go entirely. We'll see where it goes. But I think that's what my interest is here tonight.
I'm beyond fascinated by that. It's not what I expected, and it's not why I thought you invited me. I also thought that you were going to begin with the elephant in the room, like, why am I here? And I thought, like, I'm not from Anash, I'm not Geja, I'm not any of the good stuff. And I was originally planning on actually making the case for why it makes a great deal of sense for why I'm here on different grounds, on grounds of, I think, 1840, and what I'm trying to do on 1840 is that search for authenticity, that organic at-homeness. And I also I was prepared to, like, my Chabad connections, my connections to Lubavitch run fairly deep, because the principal of the school I went to, which was South Shore, which knows Yeshivas Torah Chaim, the assistant Menahel is a famed Lubavitch educator, Rabbi Newman.
Right.
And
But back in Long Beach? Which Rabbi Newman?
Rabbi Newman, I think he's like a seasoned principal in a Chabad school after he was in South Shore.
Where's this? Rabbi Newman from Long Beach? Is that Rabbi Newman?
I'm not sure.
In California?
No, he's in Long Island.
Okay.
And he was like my intro to like the introductory course to Judaism. He used to go around our classroom, talk about Mashiach. I'm 7 years old. I'm 8 years old. It's like really formative years. And he would go around to every classroom and give out jelly beans so people could make brachas, and give out coins so people could give tzedakah. And like my earliest memory is like that wondering of, like, I don't get it. Like, you're giving me the coin so I could give tzedakah. Like, what are we doing here? And the way that he ingrained, like, the reality of Yiddishkeit into my life, my brother talked about him constantly. It was the years, and we can come back to this, where Yiddishkeit, whatever you want to call it, Judaism, it was like real. God existed. God existed in a real. It was this very embodied sense of Judaism being real, where you are not yet even exposed to the concept of insincerity. You're not yet exposed to the concept of being performative. Like it's so real. It's like the jelly bean we ate was Olam Haba. It was in our hands. Like you felt it. It was so tangible. It was so real. The stories that you would hear. So that's where I thought we were going to start. But you opened up with the title of your podcast, which I know, and I gave zero thought to until you said it right now, and you emphasized the homesickness. And if you'll bear with me,
I'm gonna listen as much as you want. I may look at this just to make sure we're running, but I'm listening.
If you'll bear with me, so there's an 1840 overlap here in an hour. Podcast, what we call it, and it's different than what you say. We call it being hashkafically homeless. Hashkafically homeless. Being homeless and homesick are very different things, I think. Yes. But it's interesting that we're trying to find language to describe, I think, the identical experience, where it feels like you look up at your teachers, at all the institutions and communities, and you're no longer, I think this is what we're talking about in 1840, you're no longer as trusting. You're no longer there's that built-in cynicism that's almost like the price of doing business in our community, where you're not as trusting, and you're always, I mean, I am both the recipient of this and I use it myself. Like, I know when people interact with me online, because I have such a big following, that it's like, there must be a consciousness of the experience. I'm conscious of I know what I'm doing, like you're trying to build an audience or all of that stuff, which sucks away at the sincerity. And that's, I think, there's a homelessness because there's a lack of trust in that there are real homes that have your best interests in mind. Like in the hecticness and the chaos and the pain and all the difficulty and all the logistics that go to making a Jewish house run in 2024. And there's a lot, and everybody to different degrees is struggling and suffering, and everybody's dealing with that a little bit. And I just feel we're at a moment where that sense of trust that Jewish institutions are looking out for me in my life has totally been eroded. I think that's gone. I think that's the thing. I think that is something where people feel homeless. But let me get to the main point, and you're opening because it hit me in such a real way. You use the term homesick. It's different than homeless. Like, I think we on 1840 think about like the world where like people are like, do homes even still exist? Because I certainly don't have one. Going to whatever national organization convention that would give you this sense of belonging. I'm a part of a movement. I think a lot of people feel pretty homeless now, or they're building their niche little, corner pocket chevra. But homesick, the reason why it hit me so much is, and I never put it in these terms ever in my life, I really mean this, but anybody who knows me knows that my deepest struggle and embarrassment for the first 14 years of my life was a crippling homesickness. Crippling. Never went able to go to sleepaway camp. Never went to any sleepaway bar mitzvahs. The term sleepaway, I'm 39, still makes me nervous.
Really?
I still feel it. Sleepaway camp. It's still, my body reacts to it. Like, my body reacts to that term. It was the scariest thing in the world to me. I went to one weekend bar mitzvah. Hillel Novak, God bless him, lives in Lakewood now. And I needed to be coached by my mother for like the whole week before. And it was a stretch that I was able to go on my 8th grade Washington trip. I had a crippling homesickness.
Wait till you hear what age I left home.
It was like so, and I like think back at it and like what was I think a lot about the psychology of it, but I never think of the theology of feeling homesick. What does that mean? And I think homesickness, when people feel it, and there's two types of homesickness. There's a homesickness when you're living at home and you're afraid to leave home. And then there's a homesickness after you've left home for the home that you came from and can still visit. Like, I can still visit my home. Right. But, there's I don't know. Do we do movie references? I'm going to do it. You don't have to answer. Zach Braff has a line in the movie Garden State.
Not familiar.
It's okay. Starring, I think he's Jewish. Natalie Portman's in it. There's a lot of Jewish actors. It's okay. We'll make a reference to it. But he talks about part of growing up is the sense of being homesick in your own home. Meaning, and I know what that's like. Like, those are my single years where like you're still living at home, but you're homesick. Like, it's not the home of my childhood. And I think when I think of being homesick and like the theology of like what is that? It's I think it's people who are able to give absence presence. I think it's people who even when they're not home, the absence, what is missing, what is not there, is still tangible. And you want to be able to hold something and interact with something, but that it is limited, it is terminated at some point, it's not forever, and then you gotta be able to find it and conjure it. And the only way to conjure it is through homesickness, is through recognizing an absence, recognizing we're missing something. So something is not here with us right now. Like when I would go away from home, like what was I afraid of? I wasn't afraid that my parents were going to die. That's not the fear. It's not like a fear. It's not afraid that like my house is going to burn down. It's a sense that every moment that I am not sleeping in my house, everybody I interact with is a reminder of where I'm not. Every person, you go through a Shabbos and you're not in your parents' home and you're prone to homesickness. You're worried you're going to break down crying during Shalom Aleichem because all you can think about is where you're not, who's not there, who's not singing. And it's the homesickness that actually, and you're away from home, but it's what actually creates, it's through that absence, it's through what you're recognizing what's not there, that you now have a connection to it. But it has to come, unfortunately, for a lot of people, it comes through feelings of sadness rather than, I think, we sanctify that sadness with a term like nostalgia, which I don't know what the Jewish parallel to it, but I think we're living in the era of nostalgia.
Yeah, it's definitely connected to nostalgia. It's interesting how you're connecting a homesickness. I've never even though I've called the podcast Homesick for Lubavitch and said that words who knows how many times, I've never really connected it to my own personal experience of homesickness. I left home.
I never did either.
Yeah, but
until here.
I'm the one with the podcast called Homesick, and I left home at a very young age.
How old were you?
8.
Wow.
And then it started off as a couple months at a time, and then eventually it was longer periods.
When you're 8 years old and you leave home, like, what do you think is happening to you? Is it scary?
I haven't really thought about it for a long time. Thinking about it now, I don't think the word was fear. I mean, because I wasn't being dropped off in places where like I was safe. Let's say.
Like, you were going to relatives
or friends of family. Like I wasn't being dropped off on the street. You know what I mean?
Weren't you like? Wasn't there like an overwhelming sadness to leave your?
Oh yeah, there was at times sadness. I think the word that I would describe is confusion.
Okay.
I think the word is probably confusion, and I think that at least describing it as confusion probably is more accurate, especially as I got older. The interesting layer of confusion also is that as you get older, at least in my experience, and I became less sad or like a angry. Not I wasn't angry, but less anxious about being away from home. I wasn't worried about going away from home. There's still confusion in the sense that when you spend, especially when you're younger, when you spend long durations away from home, your concept of home gets distorted.
Yes.
Because you have this idea of home
Mm-hmm.
and this idea of your parents and this idea of your siblings and the idea of your bedroom. And one of the hardest parts for me of being away from home actually was the first day being back at home. Like, I'd come back at least twice a year, even later on in life for the Yom Tovim. And the first day was always the hardest because that's when my idea of home came into the crashing...
Into the reality of home.
Yeah, and look, I think it happens even when you're married and an adult.
I was about to say, for me, like what I think of is the transition, and I think most couples make this transition that, it could be the whole Shana Rishon in the first year of marriage. When they say we're going home for Shabbos, they're referring to their parents' home.
Right.
And then at some point, your house where you live, because you still say we're going to go to our house,
right,
but we're going to go back home.
Right.
But at some point that switches, and I think that's usually when you're
No, but I meant that when you leave home as a married person, you very often, if you go on a business trip, right, and there's the famous jokes, like there's the idea of your husband, the idea of your wife, and then you come back home and it's like, can you please take out the garbage, and it's like, wait, this whole the idea comes crashing down, like a pot, like, and I mean that's normal, and you get over it. You're like, okay, yeah, that was my mind playing games. This
Yeah.
is home, and this is what I love. I don't want to live in fantasy. I want to live in reality.
Yeah.
So, I think that's an interesting element of homesickness, at least from a personal experience, where, part of you put a nice, what would be a nice gloss on it, where homesickness, there's a positive aspect to homesickness, where
Yes.
if someone who leaves home and isn't homesick, um, forget about if he's burying the feelings deep inside, and paying the price in a different way. He's also missing out the opportunity to take those feelings and build a new home for his children,
Mm-hmm.
or for himself or herself, right? So, like, homesickness is in a way like a spur for growth, and something that causes growth and forces growth if you pay attention to it. And I agree with that. But I think another aspect of it is homesickness does play games with our minds, and a lot of times I think, at least on a communal level, we talk about the past. You see it all the time. Like, oh, we miss the past. Really?
Oh,
Really? Really? Like, do you really want to crash into the reality of
yeah.
1940s Europe or
Yeah.
1930s Europe? Like,
Or 1830s.
yeah,
Or
yeah, try walking through that door.
I could not agree with you more.
This week's episode is brought to you by This World is a Garden, a new film and concert production by Yuvla Media. Based on the Rebbe's first talk, Bosi Lgani, the production tells the story of the Chabad vision lasting over 300 years, to see this world as God sees it, as His garden. Combining beautiful cinematography with a live performance of a string quartet, This World is a Garden is a meditation on hope and holding on to a vision as time passes by. This production is now available to be shown at your Chabad house and community. Share the message and vision of Bosi Lgani with your community in a way you never have before. For more information, please visit thisworldisagarden.com.
But this, to me, it's interesting because Lubavitch, in my mind, my relationship with it is actually it is the ultimate embodiment of both extremes of this. Meaning, when I'm trying to formulate this thought properly. In one sense, like, Chabad is the ultimate embodiment, when I think about it, of what I call singing with your eyes open. Where it's like the reality that we're contending with and trying to transform is right in front of us. That always has to be the reality. That, like, on the lowest point, the most, like, right in front of you, like sing with your eyes open. Like, we're not trying to get someplace. So in one sense, the people who I most lovingly, I wouldn't even say associate with Chabad, but like who have had an impact on my life. We were talking about, like, Veli Rubin. Why not give them, the credit they deserve?
No, he's a good friend.
That idea of, like, what his book is called, social vision, of, like, seeing the holiness and the divinity and all of the nostalgia, but, like, it's right in front of you. And we're not trying to get somewhere. We're not trying to escape. And on the flip side, there's another part of Chabad, which is, to me at least, like, very escapist. It's not escapist to the 1940s, or, which I think the yeshiva world, the non-Chabad yeshiva world, is, like, always looking. I mean, they're called the yeshiva world. Yeshivas are a fairly modern invention. But Chabad, like, the trauma of the absence of the Rebbe,
Right.
where, like, it makes it impossible to really, like, so to speak, there's no moving on from that.
Right.
Like, we're always living in that moment.
Yeah, there's a Groundhog Day over there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it makes it, like, so much more challenging.
Yeah.
To be eyes wide open.
Well, that's at the heart of this podcast.
Yeah.
The heart of this podcast in general has been, exploring that contradiction, because it is a contradiction. It is a contradiction, and one of the ways that contradiction is resolved is that, kind of the dancing rabbis meme, where, like, Chabad are dancing rabbis, and, like, but, like all memes, like it's just a meme. It's not. It's underneath that layer. There's something else, right? So they're dancing almost as a meme, but but when you probe, there's a lot of heartache and a lot of grief that hasn't
Yeah,
been dealt with,
for sure.
or like,
Not in a critical way. Like
well, it's just a fact.
it's the
It's
reality.
a
Yeah.
fact, and it's a lot of it hasn't been. A lot of it is just is stuff that hasn't been resolved, hasn't been really thought through, hasn't
Hmm.
been discussed for whatever reason. I'm not a psychologist, so like, I don't know what the clinical terms would be, but
It's hard. It's scary because the movement is, on the one hand, you have people, and I know them, and I've spoken to them, I don't really mention their names, who like, they've got their heads screwed on exactly straight. They know what the reality is. You talk to them, they say it's straight. They know what's what. But there is like a fear, like there's an inherent insecurity that what if, like, can we move past this? Like, if we really take that next step, I do feel like there's this like genuine anxiety of like, can we do this by ourselves? Can we?
right, right.
It's scary for all the Jewish people because, as Chabad goes, and I think there's been like a holy. Chabad also plays with both extremes of like a holy a gaiva de kedusha. Like
Right,
talk about that a different time. How Chabad interacts with other.
right,
But leaving that aside, like there is this there's, at least as I see it, like there's this moment in 2024 where like Chabad has never been stronger and more like present, like in the headlines, like everybody's cheering on Chabad now post October 7th.
right.
But at the very same time, it makes these conversations, I'm not talking about me and you, but what you were talking about, so much more urgent, but so much harder to have.
Well, it's like I was saying, the way that people resolve this contradiction is like the outside inside. So towards the outside react one way, but towards the inside,
Yeah.
like it's a mess. Like it's like it's like when you see the guy. I've seen it myself in movies very often. It's very like it's dramatized, but that clown who like knows how to make everyone else happy.
Mm-hmm.
But then,
Yeah.
like the moment the show's over, you can see how depressed
Sad clown.
how
Yeah.
sad they are, and like they have to go back to some sad, miserable life. Because like, how much money are they earning as a clown or as a magician,
Yeah.
whatever? And
That's a real thing that I have an interesting lens to a lot of that, in two places. Meaning I see both. I'm deeply enmeshed in both of those realities. In the headline reality,
right,
like
right,
the show, the brochure, so to
right,
speak,
right,
and also like the inner reality of the individual's lives. Because um, originally, I there's a program in Ner Yisrael where they would send yeshiva bachrim like all around to teach, and they sent us to Sydney, Australia, and we taught. It was very unusual. We taught Lumudei Kodesh in a Chabad school,
hmm, hmm,
and I formed like this was like at the peak of my own yeshivishness, which wasn't that yeshivish. Don't get excited, but it was on us. But it was at peak, and I was interacting not with like Chabad Rebbes or this. I was interacting with like 10th graders in Chabad in Sydney. I'm a third year, very strong yeshiva guy in learning, and all of the um, contradictions in the way Chabad, I'm not calling it good or bad, like deals with the other, particularly other Orthodox Jews in a
right.
a lot of that came to the fore, and it was a great learning experience for me. It was amazing. So now in YU, I not very often, but at least one a semester, have students who are from serious Lubavitch families, either children of shluchim, or or people who like went off, or people who like.
Right.
So I am invited into the very nitty gritty of the word you used. I think was bullseye is confusion. I don't want to give away like who the students were, but like
No need.
had like.
I mean, this isn't much of a secret.
Yeah.
That's why I'm talking about it. I'm like 50 episodes deep at this point. And
Are you controversial in Chabad circles? Are you like 1840, but in Chabad?
to be honest, I don't follow modern Orthodox controversies that closely.
They're so much nerdier than other kind of. We have the nerdiest controversies.
I mean, I live in a relatively modern Orthodox community, but
we don't have Geshma. I like when there's a controversy in YU, like Rosh Yeshiva are fighting something. I'm like, Baruch Hashem, like finally we're like a little bit yeshivish.
I don't know if I'm important enough to be controversial. Look, I mean, there are people who are upset about what I'm doing. There are people.
What's the pushback against you? How would you articulate it?
Well, the pushback has changed also. Probably because I've changed, the podcast has changed, or the perception of it has changed. The pushback at the beginning is that I think the initial pushback was, what's this idea of Lubavitch identity? Like, what's this idea of talking about, Lubavitch in this time as opposed to another time? Like, what are you getting at? What are you getting at? What are you getting at? And what are you like? You're stirring the pot.
Okay.
And then
that's like the first reaction to anything.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Like you're probably gonna be called anything, but with the word Lubavitch in it, it could have been like, I love Lubavitch and think about it every second, and there'd be a couple clever be like, what are you trying to do here?
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I didn't take it very seriously.
It's like hitting the knee of the communal leadership.
Yeah.
It's like the first question.
It wasn't even the communal leadership.
What are you trying to do?
It wasn't even plugged in.
Did you ask a Shiloh?
The communal leadership is not aware about podcasts, but it was like people who maybe aspire to want to be leaders or whatever it is, and like they're burnishing their resume somehow. But whatever. With time, then it was like, okay, so we're not sure what your agenda is, but we're sure that you're framing questions, which is like, okay, that's how an interview works. I'm sorry, especially when I'm talking to people that are not, they're not like professional, they're not like podcast circuit goers.
Correct.
So they're not. I'm not like
this is someone's living room.
Yeah, no, but
we are now. Like
right,
that's what I like about this. Actually,
right, but I don't like. It's not people that I can like say press play, give me your spiel.
Yeah.
It's more like I have to kind of elicit it,
pull
from
it
them
out of them,
and pull it out of them and tell them where I'm going with the conversation. People didn't like how I was framing it. Look, I mean, I'm sure there was legitimate criticism. I'm human. I have my biases. Sometimes those biases come through. I'm definitely, I'm probably not as hot about certain topics as others are, and so they feel that like I'm not kind of living up to that.
What do you have in mind when you said hot? What topics were like? You must have had something in your head. What are you talking about?
I mean, look, there are things that are very near and dear to some Lubavitchers, whether it's the
Mashiach.
That's very low on the list today, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean that's lost its intensity in the sense like people, they think one thing or another. They're not going to get so upset if you go.
But what's like the?
No, it's look, at the end of the day, this podcast basically the underlying thesis of the podcast, if you want to put it that way, is that Chassidim are a topic worth of their own discussion. And what that does inevitably is it takes Chassidim outside the glare of the Rebbe's light and says, okay, we need to kind of see them for who they are. So I can understand the Chassid, I can hear his stories and his encounters with the Rebbe, and of course the impression the Rebbe left on him, but I'm not only interested in hearing about his encounters with the Rebbe. Right, there's
a world of the Chassid that's it's shaped by the Rebbe, but it is independent, so to speak.
Yeah, so like in Lubavitch,
the inner world.
So in Lubavitch, there's this concept called iskashrus, which I'm sure is.
But isn't what you're doing? I mean, I'm Mashiach's always number one on my poll. Like I am. I don't want to use the word obsessed because then people get the wrong idea. I am so fascinated by the concept of Mashiach, what it means, what it could mean, what's it supposed to mean.
Well, it's a fascinating topic.
It's beyond fascinating. It's my number one thing. But where I am now is like, don't people there must be somebody like this is the Dor Shmini or Shmini and a half.
Well, that would piss off a lot of people, but you get a
Who
pass.
who would get angry?
No, because I mean,
Why?
because
Give me the inside stuff. This is what I love.
Because the seven Duras are defined on one hand by the Rebbeim, but also defined by what happens at the end of them.
Okay.
Right. The idea of the seven Duras and Dura Shvi is that
people don't like the term Dor Shmini.
Well, according to that narrative, there is no such thing as Dor Shmini. That's where the Lubavitch theology becomes murky. That's precisely where it becomes murky. Like the Rebbe was basing out of Medrash, where the Shvi is the one that brings it down into this world and brings Mashiach. Right? There's the same way Avram Avinu was the first, and then Moshe Rabbeinu was the seventh. So you draw the same conclusions.
This is the opening, yeah.
So the Alter Rebbe is the first, and then there's seven Rebbeim.
But nobody stepped in. There's got to be somebody who stepped in and developed a theology of the Dor Shmini.
No, I mean, according to the way the Rebbe understood the seven Duras, as far as I understand it, there is no such thing. The question is, what does Dor Shvi look like after the Rebbe's passing?
That's so interesting. I'm not speaking on behalf of literally anybody. As somebody who takes the Rebbe extremely seriously and the Masorah of Chabad extremely seriously, but not the one that like, this is what you have to believe, just like engaging in their words. I'm so fascinated that would be a controversy because
that always says controversial.
Let me get to the point.
It's murky.
My read of the Rebbe was like he was like trying to like shake himself out of the Hasidim and almost saying like, you guys need a podcast about the lives of Hasidim. Like I know you're gonna hate that, but I genuinely read the messianic theology of the Rebbe was the Rebbe begging his own Hasidim to learn how to develop, move on, and have the agency without him, and realize that is the redemption. That is redemption. I don't know.
Right. So look, I mean, I think this is worth it. This is a conversation.
I'm getting too spicy.
No.
That's above my pay grade.
This is a conversation I'm happy to have. It's a very long conversation. You know.
What do you think? I mean, like,
what do I think?
What do you think is in the theology of Chabad? What do you think was intended?
I don't think that the Rebbe wanted us to be Rebbes. I think that by definition that doesn't work. I have had people on the podcast who have made similar kinds of assertions.
That he wanted us to be Rebbes?
Yeah, like that the Rebbe was shaking the Rebbe out of each person, and like that you should be the next door, and you should be
shaking any kind of Rebbeite out of.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't think so?
I mean, I don't, because I think a Rebbe is. I like definitions. I think a Rebbe is a Rebbe, right? Okay. And I think if there was a person who was a Rebbe, he would know it, and others would know it. That's by definition what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe is not a tzaddik nister. He's someone who has
for sure
is recognized as a Rebbe, right? Yeah. And that's a tradition of Lubavitch as well. And there is, there were different eras in Lubavitch where things got, there were forks in the road. Sure. But there is still.
But what now?
There's a formality. Well, first of all, an uncomfortable or even an impossible question does not force me to come up with an answer that I don't believe in. So yeah, it's an uncomfortable question. If I have to,
I don't think it's uncomfortable. I think it's the most exciting question in the world. I think it is.
For Lubavitcher, it's an uncomfortable question. It's an uncomfortable question because you are asking them the foundation of a Lubavitcher's identity is that, as a Lubavitcher, right, is that there's a Rebbe who is in Arich from him.
Yeah, right? For sure.
Okay, so
I agree with that.
Right, but not just that this Rebbe is in Arich from him. The idea of a Rebbe is in Arich from him. Right?
With you.
So you're not a Rebbe, right? Yeah. So this idea of like trying to, you're a little bit of a Rebbe and you're...
No. I want to explain. My concept of Mashiach is from the last Gemara in Teaneck, where everybody is a machal shel tzadikim. You have a circle where everybody's equidistant and everybody's pointing and saying, Zeh Keli, this is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. the concept of Mashiach to me is where we finally break down hierarchies. It is non-hierarchical. We're able to see each other as equal expressions of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the divine. That to me is the ultimate revelation, and the Jewish people represent this for the rest of the world, and the world begins to act as if there's a God in the world. That's the whole thing. The whole thing is what would, to me, Mashiach, redemption, is a reaction to one question. What would life be like if we had absolute certainty that there was a God and lived that way?
Okay, I accept
That's
that.
where I am. Am I getting too far afield?
No.
You could shut this down.
No, I'm comfortable.
Shut it down.
I'm comfortable to swim in these waters, but I think what, based on what you're saying, you asked about Der Shvi, Der Shmini.
Yeah.
The way I understand it is that Gimel Tammuz is a time in the Lubavitch kind of history, the Lubavitch narrative, is can there be Chassidim after a stalkos with no replacement, and that itself is Der Shvi. Based on what you're saying, precisely based on what you're saying, can there be people who assume agency of what it means to be a chassid without a Rebbe looking them in the face in a physical way and telling them what to do? And that itself is Der Shvi.
Why is that itself Der Shvi?
Because the way you described it, precisely the way you described it, is that if the whole idea of Der Shvi is to bring the world to Mashiach and to bring the Jew to Mashiach, and the whole point of Mashiach is agency, and not just being told what to do the whole time. So you, at some point, you need to have that moment of truth, which is to bring Mashiach, you need to be able to take that agency.
Yeah.
So that is Der Shvi. That is Der Shvi.
Okay.
So that would be the answer of why even after the seventh Rebbe passes away, it's still Der Shvi, at least theologically, right? I'm not saying on a talking on a sociological level. At the end of the day,
I look at the Dora Shmini as the generation who was born into the world without the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Right, but the Dors were never conceived as the people who were born, and that's part of, you asked about the pushback.
I think that's the shift.
Well, it's, you see, that's.
Do you think Mashiach is going to come in your lifetime? Do you think there's a Mashiach who's going to arrive while you are alive?
I don't see it as like a my lifetime kind of question. Do I believe in Mashiach coming?
Do you believe that Mashiach is going to arrive? A person is going to arrive that will announce themselves as Mashiach in your lifetime?
On a religious level, I do. The same way I believe in God. But when you say believe,
what does that mean? And when that person in your mind is the Rebbe, or you think it might be somebody else?
Do I believe it's a Rebbe? I feel that as a Lubavitcher, from what I've seen and what I've taught, that he was a tzaddik of this generation. I do believe that. I do feel that.
1,000%.
I do feel that. If that means he's Mashiach, then great. If he's not, then God knows what he's doing. That's how I think about it. I'm not trying to be coy with you. It's something that I've consciously decided not to grapple with.
Interesting. Why? Why don't you grapple with this?
Because
you don't think there's any gain from it, or
like why? Who's Mashiach, and like who's actually going to be Mashiach? And
because the question of who is Mashiach is really the question of what is Mashiach.
There's
that's the first question. To me, that's the more important question. What does it mean to be redeemed? What is going to happen?
I don't know that Mashiach is defined necessarily by who it is. I don't think that it changes. I don't think by who it changes, but you also have to understand that I grew up in a Lubavitch milieu where the question of who Mashiach is and how exactly you think of that is a question that consumed people and consumed friendships and consumed families and consumed communities. Yeah, I'm not interested. Like the Rebbe's my Rebbe, right? The Rebbe's the Rebbe.
It's sad to me to hear. I'll be honest with you.
It's not that I don't think about Mashiach. I don't think about who's Mashiach.
But the emotional baggage. I mean, this is the trauma that we spoke about. That the emotional baggage of the weight of all of these question marks in the 90s, it still weighs on people.
Well,
And
I
I
didn't
get
grow up.
that.
I didn't grow up in the '90s. I grew up after the '90s, and I'm speaking for myself. To be
Yeah.
clear, I'm speaking
Okay.
for myself. There are some people who are still very adamant one way or another. There are some people who, feel that it's their mitzvah to say who it is.
I know about this because on 1840, when we did our series on Chabad, so the episode I did with Eli Rubin, we entitled
Right.
"Is the Rebbe Mashiach" or something like this,
Right.
and the reaction was fascinating.
I remember.
I was fascinated by that. I did not expect any of that. Like Ellie called me up in advance. He was like, this is going to be a huge headache. Like, he's like, I'm not telling you what to do. Because Ellie's a tzad, like really a tzaddik. So he's a gem of a person. He's like, but you just, FYI, you're in for a headache. I'm like, what's the issue? And it was so fascinating to me that people's reaction to this Dovid Bashevkin, a non-Chabad Jew who's committed, who's clearly has bona fides of I'm not an adversary, I come in peace, and who immediately their visceral reaction was like, that's an inappropriate question. And I'm like, my first reaction was like, wait, what?
You have to understand how they've been attacked for it by so many people. I think you're approaching it from a very
it was almost
in an innocent place.
Yeah.
Where you're thinking of it like almost as like a concept that like, based on what the Rebbe stands for, if you say that he's Mashiach, then you're saying that Mashiach is embodied by what the Rebbe stood for. Right, something like that.
Okay,
something
sure.
like that. That's not how the debate was.
I know
was
that.
experienced
Sure,
back in the day. It became very much like on the body of the Rebbe, like this person.
For
Mashiach,
sure, but like
right?
I don't know. It's 2024. I just thought that like, and
Right,
there is a split between the younger and older generation.
There's a lot of
very
scars.
generational.
There's a lot of scars. No, there's a split within Lubavitch as well. I mean, this was a massive schism for many years. It's healing in terms of a relational level. I don't know philosophically if it's healing.
Yeah.
People still have different ideas, but for Lubavitcher, when you ask that question, it's not an innocent question. Like it's a very real question, and then it becomes a question of like.
I was surprised at how quickly people assumed me. I'm not like.
Right.
I always say, like, if I'm the villain in your story, you're the one who's broken. Like, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but
it's Twitter, man. I mean,
you know how Twitter is. But there is chevra who, like, the embodiment of evil in this world is me. And, like, that chevra I don't respond to. But there was chevra who were, like, reasonable chevra, like, good people. I love them. I love everybody, like, for real.
Right.
And I was just surprised that was they jumped very quickly to that conclusion. I was like,
it goes back to what you were talking about earlier. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for every response.
Yeah.
But there is a Lubavitch inside versus outside, or like klapi pnim, klapi
sure,
chutz.
yeah.
And so there's a very quick knee-jerk reaction to like, wait, is this guy attacking us? Do we need to reject him? Do we need to tamp down the argument? Tamp down the attack? Like do we need to neutralize him right away? And a lot of it, by the way, is unconscious. Like you ask a person
For sure.
where it's coming from, they don't even know where it's coming from. It's just there.
I mean, that's trauma. It's of course
it's trauma. It's trauma. It's defensive mechanism. Look,
can I say something interesting about the inside outside component? So I teach in YU. I teach a course called Jewish Public Policy, and in the beginning of the course, one of the things that we do is I map out. There's an economic model where you talk about right wing, left wing economics, and authoritarian and libertarian. So it's like four quadrants.
Sure.
Right? 4 quadrants. And there are different economic thinkers, like whether you put Ayn Rand is like, in the bottom.
Anarchist, right?
Yeah, anarchist, right? Okay, beautiful. So what we do in the class is we classify Jewish leaders. Where would you put them? This is like in terms of like right wing, left wing are you like a halachic elitist, or like everybody has a place and like let's be as inclusive as possible? And over here, authoritarian libertarian is like how institutional are you in bringing about change?
Right.
So we classify everybody. We classify the like Rosh Yeshiva in YU,
right.
Rav Moshe Feinstein, all the rabbis. And every year somebody says, where would you put the Rebbe? And my response every year is, it depends. Are we talking to anash, like
Right.
like to the insiders, or outside.
Right.
Because I would place. Again, I hope that's not seen as disrespectful. I do it to Moshe Feinstein also. Everybody gets.
That's a disrespectful thing you said.
Well,
Fellow Lubavitchers.
no.
Comparing.
That's a good shtickle. I like that. So, but like to me, like where you would place on that quadrant, and I usually say, like, I think for insiders, I would put the Rebbe top right. But like for outsiders, the Rebbe shifts. He's still very institutional, but much more inclusive in the messaging. Much more.
Yeah, I think that's a tragedy of Lubavitch getting a little bit carried away with its PR. To be honest with you, I think the Rebbe was the same person. I don't, as a Lubavitcher, I don't really buy this split. The Rebbe was very, from what I can tell,
I don't know if it was a conscious decision of the Rebbe, but I would say the experience of the Rebbe was different for insiders and outsiders.
Lubavitch has made that way. I don't know that people chose to make it that way. I think it just happened, and little choices along the way. To me, the bigger tragedy is for Lubavitchers themselves. I feel that there's, you have in Lubavitch as well, you have people that will feel that they're when they go to Chabad house, they're loved as a Jew, but when they're in Lubavitch, they're seen as like a failure of the yeshiva system. And like, where's Avos Yisrael that you have in the Chabad house for me? And that's changing. That's been changing over the past 20 years.
And I see that a lot.
That's been changing, where Lubavitch recognizes a lot of people in Lubavitch, and to their eternal credit, because they were not they were looked at funny in the beginning. They said, look, the Rebbe's message of Avos Yisrael doesn't stop at Crown Heights. It includes us as well. And, look, the way I see it.
But that's the reason why it's so hard, is because in this generation where you don't have, the Rebbe is not present in a physical sense. So the emotions that you imbibe from Chabad are really just coming from the Hasidim. And I do think in any movement, it's true for a lot, like the way that we deal with insiders, like versus outsiders. This is also true in the yeshiva world.
But this problem was more profound before the Rebbe passed away. It didn't get less profound. It was more, it was more profound before the Rebbe passed away.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It was more profound. People will point to exceptions where the Rebbe made everybody feel welcome, but no, the split of the Rebbe as like the world leader, and Rebbe, like there was obviously it was one person, so maybe everybody knew it was the same person, but no, I think the split was there before, and in many ways more profound. I think a lot of these things have been sorted out and are being sorted out to this day, and I think that goes back to what you're talking about, Dera Shvi. As you can tell, I am no gung ho, like messianic, for lack of a better word, of like the Rebbe's still alive and nothing's changed. I obviously don't believe that, and I still believe that theologically there's it's rational. I don't need to be rational, but it makes sense to me, and it works for me that it's still Dera Shvi, because I believe that today Lubavitch is still sorting through what the Rebbe was talking about. I think the world in many ways is finally assimilating ideas that the Rebbe was talking about. Homesick for Lubavitch is brought to you by Yuvla Media, a boutique video production company servicing the Chabad and Jewish community. Since opening 10 years ago, Yuvla Media has pushed the boundaries of artistic and thoughtful storytelling in the community, with an insistence on there always being a memorable story, as well as a beautiful and striking visual image that we believe is second to none. Over the years, we have worked with Chabad organizations around the country, as well as large organizations like Boni Olam, Torah Masora, and Atzalathon, guided by the belief that your story is absolutely worth telling with depth and creativity. If you are looking to tell your story with a video, please reach out to us at hello@yuvlamedia.com. Again, that is hello@yuvlamedia.com. A link can be found in the show notes. And now, back to the podcast.
Well, that's what I think the beauty is, because I think the end to this story is actually that, like, the ultimate yafutsu mainosecha chutza is when the inside needs to turn towards the outside. And we're seeing in this moment that in order to restore the present vitality of the movement, there's a willingness to engage with outside, not outsiders, but outside ideas in new and very interesting ways that I think is what injects the living vitality of it, where we're not just preserving a shadow or an image of the past, where it's like, okay, like we have this much oil in the jar that got sealed, on Gimel Tammuz, and like we just got to preserve the oil in the jar. But the people who are going out and through their work in bringing the Torah's Chabad outside of Chabad are actually also assimilating a lot of non-Chabad ideas and reinterpreting them or translating them in the Chabad theology, which I think is what adds to its vitality.
Well, look, I mean, throughout history of Jewish learning and Jewish thinking, you see many writers. By writers, I mean Rishonim and all the way down. They talk in many ways in the contemporary language, and they bring in ideas from the contemporary philosophies. Just because they did it doesn't give me or someone else necessarily a license to do it, but the idea is there. But that's not specifically what I'm talking about here. I agree with you that adds vitality and adds color, and like the story of immigration, right? Like it changes, it makes society in a certain way when done right, enriched, or it can enrich society. But I feel like Lubavitchers have enough. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at other ideas.
Yeah.
But we don't there's an idea that it says in the Gemara, I think, that it takes a Talmud 40 years to assimilate the idea of his Rav and to fully appreciate it. Like, we don't need to take the Rebbe's ideas and find the psychological language that makes it work, or the clinical language that makes it work. If that's what helps you, God bless you.
Yeah, that's not what I was talking about. But what do we need to do, in your opinion? And then I'll try to re-explain what I was saying.
I think when a Rebbe speaks, taken on face value, it's inherently paradoxical, right? The Rebbe's talking in language that demands things that don't seem to make sense, because where he's at, things work in a way that doesn't work for most people. That's in many ways the definition of a Rebbe, right?
Yeah.
And so the Rebbe would say, do this, do that, do this, do the other. Okay, how does it all work? How does it all make sense? How does a society work out that places a priority on shlichus, but also places a priority on chinuch, but also places a priority on XYZ? And it's like, these things don't seem to work out, right? And because in our minds, they don't. They're paradoxical. And that needs to be sorted out. That can't be ignored and can't be moved on from. That needs to be sorted out. And that's the work of years. Now, can other language help you? Yes, but only only if it holds a paradox. A lot of times people will take the language and basically find another language, another framework, which basically allows you to kind of dissipate the paradox, and dissipate the heat of what the Rebbe is saying almost. And it's like, well, if we translate the Rebbe of talking about this as
he really meant
self-help,
self-care, self-esteem.
That's something that I'm hearing a lot. And as a unqualified, uncredentialed person that lives in Philadelphia, it pisses the hell out of me. It does, because the Rebbe was not self. I was just talking about it the other day with someone. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about it, because I know you talk a lot about this topic.
Yeah.
But I was talking to someone the other day, and I'm like, I heard some people. I mean, it was even in your podcast. I forget who.
Yeah.
Talking about how the Rebbe's main theme or consistent theme was mental health. I don't know if he said or not, but I've heard that from other people.
Okay, I don't remember if that was on anything.
Yeah, the Rebbe always spoke about mental health, and it's like, wait a second, sending people on shlichus to the other side of the world by themselves. Which mental health professional thinks that's a good idea, or that's good for your mental health? Nobody.
Yeah, but pause. What I meant was not translating the words into the language of other disciplines.
Right.
But what I actually meant, and this is really where like Eli Rubin has such a profound impact on me, is the idea of allowing not just the words of the Rebbe, because it's not about the Rebbe, but the system of Chabad to engage and be in dialogue with the present moment, with all of its deficiencies, with all of its complexities, with all of it, but like allow it to be in dialogue with the outside world. And I think that was harder in the Rebbe's lifetime. And I think we've seen what I've seen, and I don't want to mention anybody's name. I mean, I mentioned Eli Rubin 1,000 times already, but aside from him, like that idea that Hasidus is a real system. It's not make believe. It's not politics. It's not institution building. We're not trying to make money. This is a real revelation of something real. Like coming back to where we began of like maybe God Taka exists. Maybe like God is real and Judaism is real, and we're alive in the short line. You and I are going to die in the next, 70 years on a good shot.
Yeah.
And neither of us know for certainty what happens the moment after we die. That's the great mystery. But like, what if it's real? Like, what if this short life of ours is actually meant to be in service of the divine? And what would that mean? And how would that transform our lives? And the way that Chabad has always kept, at least from my perspective, that question so central. What are we alive for? What is existence for? Why does it feel so uncomfortable and comfortable at the same time? Homesick. We're in the right place, but we don't have the right feeling. And why do we feel this way? And like that, the cosmicness of Judaism.
Yeah.
Is something that I have seen flourish actually since the death of the Rebbe. The fact that Judaism might actually be real. And I think that's the question that's been lost by the non-Chabad Orthodox community more than anything, where in the non-Chabad community, we've become so focused on our own self-preservation, meaning it's the opposite. Go to the ends of the earth. I went to the ends of the earth. I moved from the 5 towns to Teaneck. I mamish lech lecha me'aretzecha, like I'm in a different world right now.
Yeah.
And we're so tethered to this specific moment and this specific culture, 5 towns culture, Teaneck culture, Lakewood culture, like we're so tethered. It's so modern. It's so inorganic. It's the realness. You have to dig so much deeper.
Yeah.
And to me, what is so so awe-inspiring about Chabad is it begins with that basic question. Maybe God is real. Maybe in this short life of ours, there's an actual purpose. And that purpose is not just communal self-preservation. Well, the Meistus, what do you do? The Meistus. I heard from a very chashuv Rosh Yeshiva whose name I don't want to mention, but you can probably guess who it is.
I probably can't, but
well, you can't guess who it is, but I'm sure there's some listeners. He's a non-Chabad, extraordinarily chashuv. He one time said sometimes the yeshivas they would sell their children into slavery just to save the Meistus, like anything for the Meistus. Like he was making, it's crazy, it's insane. And like what Chabad, I think, and what the Rebbe specifically articulated and reminded the world is like, maybe this is real. Maybe it's not just about preserving the 5 towns, Lakewood, your Stadt. Maybe there's a common Judaism that can reach beyond ourselves. Maybe there's a common Judaism, not just reach beyond ourselves, the Orthodox community towards the non-Orthodox, but like maybe we have a role to play in the world. The Jewish people. That type of thinking, which is like, it's unfortunately almost like taken for granted that like Jews are being invited to like White House Hanukkah parties or whatever it is, and like we should have a seat at the table. Like it was the Rebbe, in my mind, who reminded the Jewish people, like maybe this is actually real. Maybe, of course, we don't have I
have to say, I'll skip with Avim. My grandfather's the one that brought the menorah to the White House.
For real?
Yeah.
That's very holy.
Yeah.
But like,
It was crazy.
I'm coming from the opposite. Can I be cathartic for a second? You spoke about your traumas. My frustration is that in the non-Chabad yeshiva world, which has certainty and realness and all these amazing qualities to it, and like put Torah central, it is so anathema for the community to reach an inch beyond itself. An inch beyond itself. I find it very frustrating. I just got an email from a very chashuv Rosh Yeshiva who I invited onto 1840.
Right.
It really pained me. His response was, "I would love to come on, but I'm going to get so much heat from the frum world."
That exists in Lubavitch too.
It does, not to the same degree, not at all to the same degree. And I was like, "What are we doing here, man? What are we doing here? Let me just finish my rant, if you'll allow me. It's late enough at night. What are we doing here? Are we just trying to preserve our reputation and our status and our whatever it is? Other people think we're on the frum side of things. Like, it's got so barf political. Like, how am I not supposed to react cynically to that? We have our thumb on the scale the whole time of what's emes and what's sheker.
Well, look,
our thumb has been on the scale the whole time. It really bothers me. It really, really bothers me. We're not seeing the reality. It's like the famous experiment with Abraham Wald. Do you know the famous Abraham Wald experiment? There were planes coming back after World War II that they kept on getting shot down, and they need to figure out, where do we bulletproof the planes? Right. Do you know this? It's a famous meme online, but I'll explain the story. Where do we bulletproof the planes? And everybody was they were looking at the planes that came back, seeing where the bullet holes were, and they said, okay, we got to armor these areas. Abraham Wald, who was a child of an Orthodox Rav and chashuv person, statistician, he said, Adarabba, it's the exact opposite. Put the armor on the places where you see no bullet holes. Why? Because you're only evaluating based on the planes that come back. The planes that come back and where their bullet holes are, we need to be thinking about the planes that never come back, that get shot down there in the bottom of the ocean. Right. As a community, I think we make this mistake over and over again.
Yeah.
All we're thinking about are the planes that come back.
Well,
I'm like, there are planes on the bottom of the ocean, and we keep on gerrymandering the lines for every community, whether it's the yeshiva world or the Chabad world or whoever it is.
Yeah, well, that's just a logical fallacy where we
gerrymander the lines of what success is. So every community, and it's all barf politics to me. I'm sorry to be. It's late. It's mamash spate. I'm getting a little unhinged.
Hey, look, in yeshivas, you have the same thing, right? Where the yeshiva will be very concerned about the bachurim who are falling through the cracks. Understandably, that's a big problem, right? But what about the guys who have potential to be the next, Rosh Hashiva, if that's your thing, or just in general to be much more capable and successful in their lives? You don't see that, right? You see the people, you see the casualties, like you see a little bit the reverse of the example you gave. But in the yeshiva, we're worried about the casualties. We're not worried about the lost potential. Because the casualties you can see, the lost potential you can't see.
I don't know if it's different in Chabad. I have never in my life bought into the narrative that any yeshiva or any institution is cultivating greatness.
Well, that's my point.
I think they think too highly of themselves. I mean, let's talk about all the greats. Lubavitch Rebbe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, the Chazon Ish. I mean, greatness comes not as a product of institutions. I think the great fallacy that all yeshivas made, that we are Gedolim factories. And like we're willing to sacrifice people falling through the cracks in order to produce Gedolim. At least as non-Chabad yeshivas, I think it's a total joke. It's the biggest joke that I've heard. Where are all the Gedolim? The strong yeshivas have never been stronger as institute. We haven't had serious world-recognized Gedolim since the mid-'90s. I would say the Rebbe, 94. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Yaakov Kamen. I don't know who the Gedolim now. They get appointed by magazines. I have no idea who they are. It's very, very frustrating. Our finger is on the scale. We are not engaging with the reality.
What do you think it is? What do you think it is? Is it? Can you chalk it up to just
self-preservation?
Right, but the Jews weren't worried about self-preservation in Europe. What happened when they came to America, in your opinion?
I have an interesting perspective because my family is deeply American. We're pre-war.
Okay.
We're pre-war America. I think that what happened is the success of the Orthodox community, which I'm talking about the post-war Orthodox community, which is not where my family is from. My family is from my bubby, my Zadie from North Adams, Massachusetts, in the Berkshires. My bubby drove an hour to buy kosher meat,
Sure.
the Price Chopper in Albany. But my Zadie worked on Shabbos.
Right.
But my bubby, her life blood was an emunah in God, a preservation of the Jewish people. I don't have access to her pinky. I think the biggest change, there are two changes that take place in the world, in my opinion, in America. Change number one is that modernity, and this is not just America, modernity reshapes the way we think of God. The greatest trauma of the world is the progress of science, and the more explanations we have, the more obscure the concept of God becomes. I'm not saying, God forbid, chas v'shalom, that God does not exist. I believe with every fiber of my being that there is a God. But the God that we once saw viscerally when anybody got sick or anytime there was a plague no longer exists. I mean, we say Tehillim when people get sick, but we also go to the hospital and we go to the doctor and we think about the diagnosis. My father takes care of cancer. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a real thing. Our understanding of God has changed dramatically in the last 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000, dramatically. And a lot is a product of modernity. Specifically in America, it basically filtered Judaism into two lanes in the 1950s. And I see this. My family home, where we're home is North Adams, Massachusetts. It's not the Five Towns. It's not the Tri-State area. It's where all of my ancestors are buried. All the Bashevkins are there. And in North Adams, it divided up into two groups. There was one group who could imagine that Judaism was real and worthwhile preserving. And that eventually became what we call either the conservative or Judaism, not the Jewish people, Judaism, conservative, the conservadox, and the Orthodox community. You know what I'm saying? In those worlds. Like my bubby, when my I had a cousin who intermarried. This is when I was either a baby. My bubby would not go. It was visceral. She didn't ask a shaila. My bubby didn't have a rabbi. She was not ask. There's no Chabad there. Like she would not go. She's not participating in that. My bubby had an instinctive, organic emunah that I am deeply homesick for. I don't think it's possible to have the emunah that my bubby had. She's born in 1921, in 2024. It's just the reality of where we live.
You're also counting the planes that are coming back in that regard, I think.
And what do you mean?
I mean, in many ways, the people who stayed firm in those days in America were people who were really, really, really pure. Most of the Jews did not stay.
I could not agree more. Meaning, the Jewish community divided up into two: the planes that came back and the planes who were totally lost. I see this in my family. Right. There are many non-Jewish Bashevkins. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Right. We saw this. We lost a great deal of planes. But the problem is, in the early eras of the Orthodox communities, the 1950s, the 1960s, 1970s, we knew there were planes that were missing. We knew that. Of course we knew that because they were our siblings. They were our uncles. They were our first cousins. They were our nephews. And as we got stronger and stronger in the 80s, in the 90s, and this was, you could map this out step by step in the American Orthodox community, we forgot more and more that the planes were missing, and Orthodox Judaism, whatever the boundaries of that are, became synonymous with Klal Yisrael. So when we would talk about, like Nebuch, like there's a crisis, like kids are falling between the cracks, and they're not steiging or whatever we got obsessed about in the 90s when the OTD the first time those words were used, being off the derech, because the boundaries of the derech were not that clear.
No, I remember. I
Right?
remember when people started talking about it.
Right? It was the Jewish Observer, 1999, had a famous two different issues on it. But whatever it is, this is all taking place in the 90s, where like now the Orthodox community is like, okay, we're Klal Yisrael. Like when you close your eyes, this is such a Orthodox, non-Chabad Orthodox thing. Like think of Klal Yisrael. It's everybody from like whether or not you wear a kippah sruga or a strimel or a black hat.
Right, there's no reform or conservative or assimilated, right?
Or women. I mean, I don't want to be like the freaky progressive dude, but like you're like at the convention. They're like every Jew is counted, whether or not you wear a kippah sruga or a black hat or a strimel. I'm like, okay, that's like
what about the sheitos?
Half the population is missing,
Right.
and of that population, you're talking about. You're basically saying that Teaneck, the 5 towns, Lakewood, Boca, Chicago, and LA could all get along.
So how does the Orthodox community getting stronger make the Orthodox community more lame?
Because anytime that you do not have a dialogue of ideas, it's the same reason why I think Chabad can struggle with internal critiques of lameness. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
When the ideas are not in conflict, when you're not trying to...
Jews need crisis.
We are always resolving something because we have an underlying commitment that we are part of a cohesive whole.
Right.
I would call it the derech of the Balei Tosfos to the Shas is our approach to our lives. The Balei Tosfos developed a very innovative derech halimud. Am I allowed to use these terms?
Oh,
Sure.
We're pro-Tosfos in Lubavitch.
What?
We're pro-Tosfos in Lubavitch.
Protest. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. No, Tosfos, derech halimud, these terms are clear. I would translate these on 1840.
No, we're good.
You're comfortable. Okay.
We're good.
The Balei Tosfos...
By the time in this podcast, they're gonna have burned it, so it's all good. But
what was the derech halimud of the Balei Tosfos? What was different about the Balei Tosfos is that when there were sugyas that were arguing on one another, they created a conceptual answer rather than saying, which many other Rishonim did take this approach. These are sugyas that are arguing, and we are poskening like this sugya over that sugya. The Tosfos, and I forgot who it was. Maybe the Yamsel Shlomo says that the Tosfos made one big ball out of the entire Shas, and it should all agree with each other. Huh. I think Jews approach their lives and Yiddishkeit with that desire. We want it all to cohere. We want it all to make sense. And the way that we make sense is being miyashev kushas, being miyashev shailas. Right. We answer, and every jagged edge, every question becomes another layer that tries to include more. Right. And I think that once an institution or a movement or a revolution or idea is no longer engaging with outside ideas, then it's not going to have the stamina or the conceptual strength to smooth over those edges. Now, every layer that we add to the ball, it's like a rubber band ball, is going to lead to a new layer of cracks and crinkles. Sure. It's not going to be, it'll never be perfectly smooth.
Until Mashiach comes, yeah.
Until Mashiach comes. Tishbi Tars Kosos Bias.
Right.
So, but that's why I think it's so important, whether it's in the Orthodox community or in Chabad or wherever it is, that we're always engaging with that tension. We shouldn't hide from it. You know, the analogy we use on 1840, and I'll finish with this.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if has this been a disaster?
Yeah, of course. Keep on going. Keep it going.
The analogy we use on 1840 is that the imagery, not analogy, the imagery we use is when a car is spinning out of control.
Yeah.
Your instinctive reaction is to grab the steering wheel and pull the other way.
Yeah.
On 1840, and what we're talking about is you steer into the controversy.
Yeah.
Hiding from the questions that make us uncomfortable is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and that I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree on that. I think I mentioned it earlier.
Lean into the controversy.
No, I'm not. Well, I'm not. I'm not. What's that?
You ever step onto the ice without ice skates?
Have I done it? I've done it. It's not a good idea.
It's not a good idea. Why isn't it a good idea? What do ice skates add?
No, it goes into the ice.
Friction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I don't court controversy, but I do believe fundamentally that uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
That's what you dive into.
Controversy is just the word that the status quo uses to describe the ever present change in the world.
No, but there's something called clickbait. There is sensationalism, but when you have an uncomfortable question, in many ways, sensationalism is very fun.
Can I want to dispel this because I get the same accusation on 1840.
No, nobody accuses me of that.
Oh, nobody does? I hope they don't.
Because I don't do it.
Of course you don't do it because how long have we been talking for?
I don't know, about an hour, 15 minutes.
An hour and 15 minutes. You'd have to be a Meshuggah if your idea of clickbait is an hour and 15-minute conversation in my life. This is the opposite of clickbait. I mean, when people accuse me of like, you're just leaning into sensationalism, I'm like, if people are listening to my podcast in order to access heresy, my podcasts are an hour and a half long, and I use big words and I mispronounce all of them. We're not. Neither of us are trying to do this. To me, this is the way the status quo tries to make sense out of change that is inherent to existence.
I mean, while you were talking, I was thinking about it. A lot of times, the answer given what's wrong with America or Jews in America is, Jews are too comfortable. Jews are too comfortable, and so they're not. And so they're not struggling for survival like the Jews did in the past. But I think what you're talking about is a more kind of positive way of looking at it, in the sense that, Gullus, there's two ways of looking at Gullus. Chassidus talks about this at length, but I'm sure this is everywhere. I think it's from the Gemara. Gullus is on one hand, of course, a punishment.
Yeah.
Right, and a punishment that you have to survive, right, and it's all about survival. But Gullus is also growth. An opportunity for growth, right?
For sure.
Right, and I don't know if this is from the Gemara, but
right. When the Talmud Bavli looks to understand itself, it looks to a pasuk in Eicha.
Right, and Talmud Bavli itself is a Gemara that is a product of Galus.
1,000%.
Right, and it has a certain...
The mission statement of the Gemara is all found in the first Mishnah in Brachos. A world where time is unclear, where you are trying to access a world that is no longer accessible and trying to find unity, Kriya Shema, in a darkened world, Ba'arvis. And the concern is that in the comfort and freedom of this world, we will forget the urgency of the stakes, which is the end of the Mishnah, that you will go to a wedding and you will forget Zman Kriya Shema and you will be over in Avera. And keep in mind, this is, in the opening Mishnah, they are using an invented term. I wrote a book about this.
Which one?
Avera.
Avera is an invented term.
Does the word Avera as a noun appear in the Torah? No. We have great nouns for sin. Chet, Avon, Pesha. Right. Avera is a rabbinic invention.
Avon is
La'avor is a verb.
Right.
But the noun of sin was never Avera until rabbinic literature. And poof, the word makes an appearance in the opening Mishnah of all of Shas.
Interesting.
Because la'avar is in the world of Galus, like we feel our boundaries.
Right. So it's all about growth. It's all about growth, and growth, of course, comes from, like you said, friction. It comes from challenge. If you're not challenged, you're not going to grow. You're just going to stay stagnant.
1,000%.
You're going to reinforce and stagnate. And that goes a little bit back to what you're talking. You asked about Derash Shmini, Derash Shvi. I think ultimately, Derash Shmini would be an escape. Derash Shmini would be turn the page. Let's not deal with this particular challenge. Let's
interesting.
Right?
I didn't mean it that way, but I understand what you're saying.
But Derash Shvi is can there be a Dur that exists without its manig alive? Right? At least in Lubavitch, right? The Rebbe passed away. Is this Dur still vital? And
my eyes are wide open.
That's an existential question.
This might not mean anything to you or any other Chabad Chassid. My answer is that in the present moment, regardless of what you think or what you feel, what you're anxious about, Kol Atzmosei Tomarna is a resounding yes. Here we are.
Yeah, no,
Here we are.
I agree.
How could the answer not be a resounding yes?
That's a question. That's a question. There's no. the moment that we think that we've answered that question with a resounding yes,
I don't think there's anything we're waiting for. I think we're here. You know what I'm saying?
we're still going. There's obviously reason to still be going. Mashiach isn't here yet.
Yeah.
Right. But that is if
For some.
is it possible? It's definitely possible. Will it continue? Well, it's up to each of us. I mean, the way I phrase it sometimes is, Chassidus Chabad doesn't die with its last Rebbe. It dies with its last Chassid.
Ooh, is that yours?
I made it up.
Say it again. That's a good line.
Gotta,
Say it again.
now I'm ready. Now I'm ready squeezing my ego over here.
Yeah, no, say it again.
No,
say it again. For real. It was a beautiful line.
Chassidus doesn't die with this last Rebbe. It dies with this last Chassid.
I am so on board with that. I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's what this podcast believes. That's what this podcast believes, and I mean that's what I believe, and
that's what you're doing, because this is siach. This is non-hierarchical conversation. You're coming with me, open-hearted. We're talking. You have your beliefs. I have my beliefs. You have your world. I have my world, and we're just seeing and we're talking to each other.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are capable of it.
And the world of Mashiach, says Reb Tzadok, May Siach, comes from the world of Siach. Siach is the transcendence of despair. 318, one more than Yush. Siach is the conversation, is mincha, lasuach basada, is the conversation when the world is chaotic, but you can take a moment and greet HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not with all the hoopla that you're able to do on Yontiv and Shabbos and Shachars and even Ma'ariv in the day ends, but like in the midst of the chaos, to stay connected. That means the connection. It's not. You're not reaching up. You're not reaching down. It's within.
Yeah.
And I think that's the world. That's the world I'm trying to access. The world of siach. And I think that's what you're doing.
Well, look, I appreciate it. I mean, I shared it with someone last week.
I love that line.
I shared with someone last week. It was a line that really stuck with me for last week's Torah of the Alter Rebbe. I'm sure you're familiar with the Sefer Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Alter Rebbe teaches, Vayivasu Yaakov Levade, why did Yaakov stay?
Yeah.
So Rashi says to save some Pachim Ktanim, which of course is the springboard for many Vertlach and Seif of what exactly Pachim Ktanim are. The Alter Rebbe says, that Yaakov stayed because he had moved his family away because the possibilities that he thought, the spiritual possibilities that he had hoped to have with his encounter with Esav were no more. So he saw only danger for his family. He moved them to the side. But now he was there to save his brother. His family he left. He put them in a safe place. Now he risked everything just to save his brother. Esav. Just to save his brother. And he realized that Esav no longer offered spiritual opportunity. Toyu taken the whole thing. But now it was him as a brother to care for Esav and to find something for Esav. What was, in a way, even it's a whole long thing. I don't want to go into it.
But why are you bringing it up now? I love that.
Why? Well, because it's all about dialogue and
singing with your eyes open.
And Yaakov. One of the things, of course, about Yaakov is he's the first of the Avos to have all of his kids. How did he achieve that? His kids were not uniform.
Yeah.
His kids were not all wearing black hats.
Yeah.
They were not all looking the same, not all towing the line. They had terrible friction as brothers. They threw, for God's sake, they almost killed one of their own.
Now that you mention
they hated each other.
Yeah.
They hated right? They hated each other, right? How did he keep them all together?
Okay.
Because he cared about his brother the way he did. He cared about his brother the way he did.
The Alter Rebbe says this?
That's
your Torah?
No, he connects it in the mimer, but he doesn't connect it as explicitly. But he goes from talking in the same mimer
that he talks risked about everything
for Esav, and then he talks about in the end Al Pi Kabbalah. I could go on it for a half hour, but he explains how Yaakov was Tiferes, which is why he was dealing with Esav, and because he was Tiferes was also why Mitasa Shlema. It's all connected there.
Yeah.
The phraseology that I'm using is.
What do you feel your grasp of Hasidic, Kabbalistic ideas are?
At times amazing, at times tenuous.
On the bell curve among Hasidim, where would you place yourself? There's a bell curve. Right over here is the 50th percentile. Where would you place yourself?
I have no idea where people are at. I loved learning when I was in yeshiva. I did pretty well. I'm not a professional Hasidist.
Would you call yourself a shtickle Talmid Chacham?
I enjoy learning Torah.
I'm allowed to ask these questions. This is Trump's America. We're allowed to ask these questions.
I'm good. I learned a lot of Chassidus in my day. I haven't, sadly, if I'm being honest, kept up with it.
Do you learn Chassidus daily?
No, sadly I don't. I'd love to, but I don't.
Do you learn Gemara?
It depends on the tkufa. I love learning Gemara. It depends on the tkufa. I'd like to blame it on on my business schedule, but probably has nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
I mean that's a different story for itself. I loved learning in yeshiva, and I probably thought that would be the course of my life, and I haven't fully yet adjusted to being a balabas and figuring out the.
This is the course of your life, my friend.
Fine, but but like there's when you learn in yeshiva in that kind of intense way, at least for me, it's hard to kind of modulate and become like the perka chachas perka arvis.
Yeah,
I haven't figured that out yet, and I'm not defending myself. I need to figure it out because whenever I do, I feel much better. I
think you did figure it out. I think it might be this. You just didn't figure out what you should be doing, if you'll allow me, because your Torah is very sweet, is that at the beginning and end of every interview, you should be sharing Torah.
Well, this is so. Thank you for that. I loved that mimer so much.
Do you like writing?
I do.
Like I write a lot. I publish.
Yeah.
So like, I haven't had a normal Seder of learning in a decade. I mean, mamish.
But you're right.
But because I write literally like the Taisus and Brachas and Daf Yud from a base, like my whole day is like.
Oh, you were the one that did it every day of Daf Yomi?
No, I do at the end of every Masechta.
All right, that I saw. Okay,
I'm whatever I'm thinking about every moment. Like I love this stuff.
Right. So I got a little bit burnt out of professionalizing my learning. I did do that for a little bit after I got married. It didn't work out for me.
What does that mean?
Like trying to make a living out of it.
Is this professionalizing?
No, I make no money off this.
Great.
I make money off video. I make money off video production. So
it's such a blessing that you don't have to do it.
So now,
can I just say one thing?
So we'll see how long it lasts. But I'm starting a share my house.
Don't give up.
No,
you just started to share your house?
I'm starting this Thursday.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is actually I think about this constantly because I did professionalize my life, and like I have such an uncomfortable relationship with being a rabbi because it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah,
because I'm not, but I am. But like the fact that I'm not is why I'm like I'm mamish am,
right?
And the fact that I mamish am is why I'm mamish not. Do you understand what I'm like? I can't explain it. Like,
yeah.
I mean, did you ever see the movie The Departed? Did you watch movies or no?
Now I feel like I'm one of my dates back in the day.
Yeah,
that's the questions you used to ask.
And what did you answer?
Well, I make movies for a living, so
you do watch movies. Do you know who directed The Departed?
Yes, of course.
You do. Scorsese.
Yes. So I don't remember the movie well. I think I watched
it. Okay.
I watched it.
You fast forwarded. You didn't look. Okay, Mazel Tov.
I'm not playing those games. I watched it. I just don't remember it.
I don't
remember the details.
It's a movie about Leonardo DiCaprio plays an undercover cop,
backstabbing
and
lying.
Matt Damon plays an undercover villain.
Yes.
And much of my life, I was confused, and my deepest insecurity is what character am I? Am I Leonardo DiCaprio?
See, that's why the Lubavitchers don't watch movies. We avoid these kind of issues.
Am I a rabbi who's undercover as a heretic, or am I Matt Damon? Am I a heretic undercover as a rabbi?
There's a famous story with one of the Lubavitch Rebbes. I forget which one.
Tell me.
No, and I have to remember the details.
I don't know like the classics. I know like
no, but this is a famous one where. Oh no, and I'm gonna butcher it. Something about a chassid that came to Yechidus dressing up like a chassid. Oh damn it! It's on the tip of my tongue.
You have such a potty mouth. You said the D word and the P word.
What was a P?
Pissed.
Did I?
Do you know I never use that term?
Sorry.
I dumped a girl because she used that term.
Well, good. We're not on an actual.
I know it's very good, but we'll use the dating questions. But anyways, this question.
But the Rebbe said that dressing up. What's your real? Who are you really?
Yeah.
but I'm butchering it. There's a story. There's a profound line over
You'll
there.
text me afterwards because I do
No,
want to hear it. And I love
for
your stories.
For the people listening. Anyway.
But I struggle with that question a lot, and I think that's the question of homesickness.
Yeah.
The question of homesickness is the question of, is in my present moment, like, am I really home but I feel away, or I'm really away but I'm convincing myself that I'm at home. And I think in a lot of my own life, my question was, am I an imposter or am I undercover?
Yeah, there's a lot to do with it does have a corollary to homesickness in the sense that it's part of growing up.
Yeah.
Can I actually make a home that I'm not homesick in?
Exactly.
Right?
I let go of that.
Can I be a rabbi that I'm not
Exactly
embarrassed to be of? Yeah, absolutely.
And I let go, and it took me a long time.
Yeah.
It took me a really long time because I know what I look like. I know how I talk. I know my movie references. If you do the math, like, wait a second, that movie came out in 2004. He should have been, whatever it is.
I'm not making a cheshbon.
But whatever it is, it took me a long time to be able to love who I am, to love what I do, to be able to fully love the present moment and where I am. And I think that can be a lifelong avoda for people. But that is the main avoda. The main avoda is to find your home, the bias in the present moment. Yeah. That's everything.
Yeah, I was telling someone yesterday that the hardest part of being in my 30s, or I think it's general for other people in their 30s, is you realize that you are the age of all the adults you remember as a child.
Exactly.
Right? Because you don't remember from when you're a baby. You remember from when you're in your teens.
Yeah.
And they're all in their 30s.
Yeah.
Late 30s, 40s. Say, wait a second. I'm them now.
Yeah.
What the hell am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Right? And like
I don't have any secrets. I don't know anything that I don't have access to.
Right. Like they were
just as clueless as I am now.
They were on the boards of the school. They were making decisions for the community. Yeah. They were taking responsibility. They realized that if they had to, they raised money. And it's like, okay, that's what we need to do. And there's no answer to this question. It's just grappling with the question. I'll finish off with one story I think that you'll enjoy. This one I do remember because it's very dear to my heart.
This has been such a joy. I want you to know this. And
thank you.
The reason why, and like a lot of time, like, phrase this in the right way, the reason why it was so instinctive for me to say yes is because Kamayim Panim al Panim, Kain Leva Adam. I don't know the exact pasuk, but Tosos quotes it in Psachim, Daf Kuf Yud Gimel. It's a classic yeshiva guy. I don't know where it is in Mishlei.
If you're Lubavitch, you'd quote it from a Sikha. It's fine.
Okay. But
or from Tanya.
You always approach me with like just an honesty, and I savor what I'm most homesick for, like my greatest desire that I feel is unfulfilled in a lot of ways, though I feel like my life is surrounded by bracha in every corner. But my greatest desire is to be able to sit with somebody and just have a sicha, and just a conversation about, to be able to experience sincerity in this world in 2024. You know, we're in my freaking dining room. What time is it? Holy smokes.
It's late.
It's late, but to be able to have a shemet of authenticity and honesty between us is...
Yeah, you need to open up a podcast, basically, if you want it.
No, it's very sweet. I loved it. And honestly, I think I would have sat with you regardless of whether there were microphones. I really love what you're doing.
Appreciate it.
But finish with the story.
So there's a story, and I share it also because it's connected to this Kislev. I found this story in I don't know if you've heard of the Sefer Kuntras Umayim by the Rebbe Rashab, which was written for at the time, of course, there was besides the communists attacking Lubavitch and other from communities from that side, there was, in Lubavitch itself, there was a group of intellectuals or secular Jews who were fighting Lubavitch almost as viciously as it wasn't the communists said, it was the Tsarist government. Yeah. They were sicking the Tsarist government on Lubavitch. And so one of the concerns of the Gedolim at that time was the men not losing their kind of fortitude, and so Kuntres Mayan is written to them. Anyway, as a preface to Kuntres Mayan, there is a 50-page or 40-page introduction written by the Rayat, so the Rashab's son wrote this introduction, and really it's not an introduction, it is a journal, or it's excerpts from the Rayat's journal, and his journal was extensive, as everybody knows, from the years around that time, kind of giving a glimpse of the zeitgeist and what they were up against, and the fights that they were pursuing against both the Tsarist government on one hand and the secular anti-religious Jews on the other hand. I'm just giving you the background.
Okay.
Anyways, because of all the things that the Rashab was fighting in Askanos wise, there was a Yutis Kislev, I think it was Samach Beis, Tafresh Samach Beis, that he was not able to be in Lubavitch for Yutis Kislev, which was unheard of in Lubavitch. The Rebbe Rashab traveled out of Lubavitch often, mainly for health reasons.
But they always come back for.
But Yutis Kislev was a day, and Chassidim would come in. It was a day that everyone looked for, and that year he missed. It was clear that he was not going to make it back, and so in lieu of being there, the Rebbe Rashab wrote a letter that was sent to the yeshiva and read, in lieu of his presence. And that's when the Rebbe Rashab spoke about Yutis Kislev being the day of Rosh Hashanah Chassidus, Erva Chais Nafshenu Nitan Lanu, and it became that line became the way that Yutis Kislev is seen by Lubavitch since
the one year he didn't make it.
Yeah, which is interesting, right?
That's coming back to where we began.
Yes, correct.
Presence of absence.
Lubavitch has been dealing with this theme for forever.
Yeah.
With the Rebbeim here as well. Anyway, basically, this letter became like fire in Lubavitch. It was this amazing letter, and there was a whole very orderly. I'm not sure why it was so orderly, but this letter was transcribed and copied. Those days there were in Lubavitch there was certainly no printing presses or anything, and it had to be handwritten and copied painstakingly. And it was a whole thing of who gets a letter first, who gets a copy, which community gets a copy of the letter first. And some communities only received it a couple months after Yutis Kislev. I tell this all to you because in the city, I think it was Petersburg, the Lubavitcher community there, which was very small because in those days, only very few religious Jews were allowed to live in the cities. Most of them had to live in the Pale of Settlement. So a few Lubavitchers there. It was only a couple months after Yutis Kislev. It was sometime in Shvat that they received the letter. And because they were receiving this letter, Yutis Kislev in Shvat, on that year they celebrated Yutis Kislev in Shvat. Okay, how did they celebrate?
Yeah.
You're going to love this story. Now, again, I'm missing details because I'm terrible with names, but there were two brothers in town in Petersburg. One of them was a Chassidish guy, a Chassidish Yid. The other one was, as the Frierdiker Rebbe describes him, a known Frayak.
Okay.
Did not keep kosher, did not keep Shabbos. No, he spells this out.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Oh,
just,
the Rebbe. Okay.
Yes, I'm not elaborating. I'm not exaggerating. A known.
Nothing.
He's known, but he says known.
Frayak.
Well, not Frayak, but known.
Okay.
Known, not religious person who didn't keep Shabbos, didn't keep kosher. But he had a certain feeling for being a chassid. He was clearly still connected to the community, and he felt like a Lubavitcher.
Yeah.
He hears about this whole hullabaloo of this letter.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, we're making a fabringen in my house. So they went to the caterer, the local kosher caterer. They bought new dishes. They cleared out his treif dishes. They set up a kosher catered fabringen in his house. And the chassidim come and fabringen and celebrate Yutis Kislev in Shvat in this man's house. And they spend all night fabringing. And as a result of the fabringen, the Frierdiker Rebbe doesn't say that this man became a chassid, but he does say that as a result of the fabringen, this man, throughout all his terefa dishes, bought a whole new suite of kosher dishes, and for the first time in years, closed his office for Shabbos. Frierdiker Rebbe says, Boyre, come and see the massive possibility or potential of a chassidish fabringen, that with proper care for the Rebbe's words and proper conversation, a Jew that was eating treifas and wasn't keeping Shabbos for years could be inspired for good.
I love it.
those are the stakes. Those are the stakes. Anyway, thank you very much for doing this.
My absolute privilege and pleasure.
Pleasure meeting you.
Bemis.
And we're gonna go down the sinking ship together.
Amen.
All right. The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentance Doors by Oren Sor Nadav Bachar and is used with their permission.